All right, so now we're going to be delving into the paragraph location question. This is a tricky question. A lot of students have a tough time with it, but in this video, I'm going to show you how to do this question effectively and how to increase your chances of answering these questions correctly. So here we go. This is what the paragraph location questions look like. You will know that this is a paragraph location question because right over here, it's going to ask you about which paragraph contains the following information. So that tells you that you have to be looking for a certain paragraph. Sometimes it might also say which section contains the following information. That is also possible. It doesn't usually happen. Usually they say paragraph, but you could also see the word section substituted for paragraph over here. So these questions are not in order, and as indicated by the red dot over here, this is a harder question, so ideally you should leave this question for the end. And when I say leave it for the end, I don't mean leave it for the end of the test, okay? Don't do that. I mean leave it for the end of that reading passage. So for example, if you have 3 different types of questions for reading passage number 1, then you should do the easy questions first for that reading passage number 1, and then once you have answered all questions from the first reading passage, you can then move on to answering reading passage number 2. Again, you have to do the same thing, and after that, you can move on to reading passage number 3. So let me give you a bit of explanation, a little bit more information. So as you already know, these questions are not in order, so they are challenging, so save them for last. Because when you save these questions for the end, you will give yourself more time to understand what the passage is about. So when you go and do the easy questions first, you're going to build a better understanding about that reading passage. You'll get a chance to familiarize yourself more with the information in the passage. So this way, it'll be much faster for you to locate the information. The questions from the paragraph location questions are going to be made up with information from different paragraphs. And here's the thing about this question. In the paragraph location question, you have to look for very specific information. In the question, it's going to ask you for very specific information, and you have to look for that specific information. This question is different from the headings questions. We're going to cover the headings question in a later video, but right now you just need to understand that the paragraph location question is different from the headings questions in that the paragraph location question asks for very specific information, whereas the headings question asks you for the main idea of a certain paragraph. So in the headings question, you have to look for the gist of the meaning of that paragraph, okay? We're looking for the main idea of that paragraph. But not so in paragraph location questions. For paragraph location questions, it's very specific information that is probably going to be mentioned in 1 or 2 sentences. Take note that this is a tough question, so you should expect to see a lot of synonym language, and when the question is asking you for specific information, that specific information is going to be disguised, it's going to be hidden in some sort of synonym language. Finally, as you've seen with other question types, the information that this question is going to ask you for is going to come from only 1 or 2 sentences in the reading passage. Now let's go over the basic strategy. So first, you're going to be marking the keywords in the paragraph location questions, and then you're just going to leave those questions for the end. So after you have marked the keywords in those questions, don't do anything with them, just leave them be and move on to doing the easy questions first. Do the other questions that are easier, that are in order, do those ones first, such as fill in the blank, multiple choice, yes, no questions. Do these ones first, because when you do these easy questions first, you'll become more familiar with the paragraphs, with the reading passage, and then you can come back to the paragraph location questions and it'll be much easier for you to answer them. So when you are looking for the keywords to these easy questions in the reading passage, you have to keep an eye out for the keywords from the paragraph location questions. So remember how we mark the keywords in step number 1 in the paragraph location questions? Well, you have to have those keywords in the back of your mind so that when you are scanning for the keywords to these easy questions, you'll have the opportunity to also take note of the keywords from the paragraph location questions. And if those keywords jump out at you while you are searching for the keywords to these easy questions, then go ahead and mark them. Then, once you have finished answering the easy questions first, after that, you can return to the paragraph location questions or to other difficult questions like pick from list or summary questions. Okay, so do the easy ones first, then come back to the harder questions and do those at the end. And when you do come back to these hard questions at the end, you might be wondering, where should I start? Which questions should I answer first? Well, that's quite easy. Hopefully, by this point, you will already have noticed some keywords from the paragraph location questions. So while you were scanning for the keywords to the easy questions, you will already have noticed some keywords from the paragraph location questions. So since you've already found some keywords from those paragraph location questions, it's best to start there. Start with those questions first because those are questions for which you already have the information. So start there. Now, let me take you through some examples. Let me show you this basic strategy that we've just learned in action. Let's apply that to these questions and see how to answer these questions. So here it asks us which paragraph contains the following information. The answer choices are from A through H. So we have to find out which of these paragraphs is going to be the correct answer choice for each one of these questions. So first, we're going to start off by marking our keywords. So remember, right now we're looking at our reading passage, and let's say that we have 3 different types of questions in our reading passage, and this is one of the question types. What we would do is before we answer any questions, before we answer the easy questions or the difficult questions, we are first going to come to these questions and we're going to mark the keywords in these questions. So let's go ahead and mark the keywords for question number 1. Here, I'm only going to mark project and natural phenomenon. In such a case, I'm trying to keep my keywords to a minimum. I don't want to mark too many keywords because otherwise I can't hold them in the back of my mind. So it's best to stick with the best keywords. The easiest keywords in this case, project and natural phenomenon, are pretty good keywords. When I say keywords, I'm mainly referring to subject, object, and verbs. Those are the best keywords. If you have proper nouns and numbers, those are of course fantastic as well. You're probably not going to see proper nouns and numbers though with the paragraph location questions. It's rather rare. So stick with subject, object, and verbs. Let's move on to question number 2. So here I'm only going to mark successful, and then for question number 3, I'm just going to mark definition. Right here, we have the word geoengineering, and this word reappears here as well as down here. So this is a repetitive keyword. It seems that the whole article is going to be about geoengineering. So this is not a very useful keyword for us, so it doesn't make sense to mark this. Now, once you have marked the keywords by underlining or circling them, just leave them alone. Don't do anything with them. Do not answer them. You have to save these questions for the end. At this point, what you would do is simply leave these questions and you would go on to answering the other questions first. Other questions that are easy, that are in order. Do those questions first and then come back to these questions at the end. This will give you a chance to become familiar with the concepts and the ideas of the reading passage. Now, at this point, when you do come back to these questions after answering the easy questions, the question is, where should you start? Which one of these questions should you answer first? Well, You have to start by answering the questions for which you have already located the keywords. Okay? If you've already located the keywords for any of these questions while you were searching for the answers to the easy questions, start with those questions, okay? Because these are questions for which you already have the information, you've already located the keywords, so start there. Because these are going to be the easiest questions for you to answer. So let's say that in this example over here, question number 3 is the question to which we located our keyword while we were looking for the answers to the easy questions first. Let's say that while I was searching for the answers to the easy questions, I came across the keyword definition or a synonym language for definition, and let's say that I already located this information. Well, in such a scenario, it makes sense to start by answering question number 3 first, because I've already found the information for this question. So I'm going to start off by answering question number 3 in this case. A final thing to keep in mind before we go on to answering these questions is pay attention to these words in the red color. I have highlighted them for you to show you that these questions are asking you for very specific information. Okay? Again, these questions are not like the headings questions. In the headings question, they want you to identify the main idea of the entire paragraph. That's not what these questions are about. These questions are looking for very specific information. For example, question number 1 is looking for a mention of this geoengineering project. Okay, a mention of this geoengineering project. Number 2 is looking for a very specific example. And number 3 is looking for a definition. So those are very specific pieces of information that you have to look for. Now let's go ahead and start off by answering these questions, and I'm going to start off by answering question number 3. So question 3 is a common definition of geoengineering. So let's look at our paragraphs now. Let's say that we are comparing these two paragraphs. Of course, when you are actually sitting in your test, you are going to have the entire reading passage and you're going to have multiple paragraphs through which you will have to search the information. In this case, our answer choices are between paragraphs A through H. So let's say, for the sake of this example, just to show you how it works, we're going to be comparing these two paragraphs. So at this point, I'm assuming that I've already located this information while I was looking for the answer to the easy questions first. So while I was scanning these paragraphs, I came across the synonym language for definition. And that is this part right here. A term which generally refers to something. So anything that is a term that refers to something is synonym language for definition. So that is synonym language. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to find my answer over here. At this point, I would underline the matching sentence and I would read this matching sentence to make sure that that is in fact the correct answer. So here it says something about geoengineering, a term which generally refers to the intentional large-scale manipulation of the environment. So it's defining geoengineering. What is the common definition of geoengineering? Well, it tells you that right here. So the correct answer is going to be A. Let's move on to question number 1. Now, we are going to be comparing these two paragraphs, C and D, and I'm going to be scanning for these keywords and especially synonym language. I'm expecting to find a lot of synonym language since this is a difficult question. So here we go. I'm looking for project and earlier natural phenomenon. Okay, here I see projects. So maybe our information is in this paragraph. I also want to look for earlier natural phenomenon. Remember, we are looking for very specific information. I don't see anything here about earlier natural phenomenon. So let's move on to paragraph D. Okay, look at that. It says modeled on historic volcanic explosions. Something that is historic is synonym language for something that happened earlier, something that happened in the past. And volcanic explosions are an example of a natural phenomenon. That is synonym language. So modeled on historic volcanic explosions is synonym language for based on earlier natural phenomenon. Okay? To be modeled is synonym language for to be based on. So this is where we're going to have our matching sentence. This is the part where we're going to find our answer. The sentence says, the idea is modeled on historic volcanic explosions such as that of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines. So the correct answer choice is going to be D, because in paragraph D, we have a mention of a geoengineering project that is based on an earlier natural phenomenon. Okay? Be very attentive to the synonym language that is being used. It is going to be very relevant, and this is where it's either going to make or break your score. You have to be able to recognize this synonym language and also comprehend the synonym language. Let us go ahead and answer our final question. Question number 2 is an example of a successful use of geoengineering. Okay, so we're looking for an example that is successful, a successful example. So here we have these two paragraphs. We're going to be comparing paragraph B and D. So let's look for synonym words and substitutes for the word successful. We are specifically looking for an example. That is the specific information that we are searching for. So here we go. Right here, right away, I see this phrase, shown to work. Something that is shown to work is synonym language for something that is successful. It successfully works. So that is synonym language. So it's likely that I'm going to find my answer over here. So I'm going to underline this. This may be our matching sentence. Now let's go ahead and read this matching sentence and let's see if this is in fact the correct answer.